My sister took my childhood journal and showed it to our dad to make me look bad. But I wasn't going to sit and let her get away with it, not this time. You know how it goes. She's always been the favorite, the golden child. Every time Dad praises her for something small, I get reminded of how she's treated like royalty while I'm stuck in the background. Last week, we were at dinner, and I mentioned how I'd landed a new job. You'd think I just told them I was moving to Mars. Dad didn't even acknowledge it, just launched right into another story about how my sister helped a neighbor with their cat. It's typical, and honestly, I was beginning to wonder why I even bother sharing my life anymore. But then I found out she was acting shady with my journal. Like, who does that? It was a big deal for me, a safe place for all my thoughts and dreams. I had that thing since I was like 10. I vividly remember writing down my feelings, including how those moments of feeling overlooked by my dad hurt more than I could say. It became my escape. So, for her to use it to paint me as the jealous sister, that just flipped a switch in me. I didn't just want to confront her. I wanted to expose her and show Dad how manipulative she really is. I thought I could get my journal back easily. Naively, I went to her room while she was out. I rummaged through her stuff like I was on some kind of treasure hunt. Nothing like a sibling rivalry, right? Anyway, while looking, I found something else, a letter from my mom, written just to my sister, filled with praise for all her achievements. It made me feel sick. It was like the ultimate dagger in the back. Mom never talked to me like that. When I finally found my journal at the bottom of her closet, I couldn't believe it. How could she keep this from me? And it hit me. She's not just playing the victim with Dad. She's got Mom wrapped around her finger too. As I held my journal, I had this spark of an idea. If she's turning my own feelings against me, I'd come back with a plan. One that would bring all these lies out into the open at the next family get-together. I'd gathered evidence, text messages from her framing me, even clips of her own stories about me that explained how good she really was. It was time to show everyone my sister for who she really is. And while I was at it, I'd finally make Dad see that I'm not the drama queen in this family. She is. As I sat on my bed, flipping through old photos on my phone, trying to find some memories to gather evidence about my sister's behavior, I stumbled across a video from last Christmas. I remember at one point she'd pulled a major stunt, pretending to forget my gift to win the sympathy card, again. Watching the video, there was this moment where I caught a glimpse of my mom holding my journal. It didn't register back then, just another photo op. But why was it there? And why did Mom smile so proudly while my sister was posing next to it like it was some kind of trophy? The piece just didn't fit. My journal had become a weapon in their hands, and I was beginning to realize how they manipulated these situations. That night, I called my cousin, trying to get a feel for just how deep my sister's web of lies went. I shared my suspicions about that video, thinking a second set of eyes might help me unearth some inconsistencies. But as I spoke, it hit me. My cousin had always been close with my sister. He dismissed my concerns, saying I was overreacting, and suddenly I felt isolated. Then he said something that packed a punch. You know how she is. Maybe it's just better to let it go. It felt like a betrayal, but also a reminder that people were getting pulled into her twisted perception of reality. He wasn't the only one siding with her. I was losing ground, and that flipped something in me. I wasn't just fighting my sister anymore. I was fighting a whole narrative, and it seemed like everyone was on her side. While I was spiraling about how to address everything, I caught Mom going through the basement boxes earlier that week, separating out what looked like keepsakes. As I peered in, I noticed she was dismissing things that had my name on them, all while laying out my sister's winning trophies. I felt a rush of anger bubble up. This wasn't just about my journal anymore. It was about my whole childhood. I quietly went through the boxes when she left, and I can't explain the rush when I found Mom's old letters to my sister, congratulating her for even the tiniest achievements. Then I found it. My mom had put aside a letter from my school's principal. It was addressed to both of us, but my name was barely mentioned. It was all about my sister's success and how they were considering a high school scholarship for her. That completely exploded the idea of how they treated us differently all those years. My stomach turned. My family had prioritized her from the start without admitting it. As I wrestled with this, I realized I couldn't just sit back and wait anymore. My sister was spinning her lies, and I had to find a way to pull everyone back into reality. I called the family dinner for the weekend, determined to blow the lid off. But I couldn't shake this nagging feeling in my stomach that something bigger was at play in my family, something darker than just sibling rivalry. And the tension kept building, between my mom, my sister, and even my cousin too. It was all hitting a boiling point. I couldn't help but wonder what else I was about to uncover, and if I was ready for it. Feeling fired up about what I gathered, I started digging deeper. I'm talking late-night scrolling through social media, my sister's precious curated life. She'd posted another one of those feel-good family shots, and it just made me sick. Everyone looked perfect, right down to the cat that supposedly loves her more than it loves me. Anyway, that's when it hit me. What if I could get some dirt on those achievements she always flaunts? I noticed one photo from a graduation event where the local news covered my sister's school awards. I couldn't just sit back anymore. I put my plan into motion. So I concocted an excuse to ask for a favor from my old high school teachers. I marched in there and casually asked if they could help me find a list of awards she supposedly won. Talk about poking the bear. Once I started that, I realized I risked even more alienation. But here's the kicker. My mom caught me digging through the old emails, and I swear I saw the disappointment in her eyes. It was way too easy to see where the real loyalties lay. That same week, I stumbled across an old email chain between my parents. A thread where they discussed a family meeting, and what stood out to me wasn't their normal banter. It was Dad mentioning a surprise for my sister's graduation years back. Something big, like a vacation. That was news to me, because I never knew her high school graduation had been treated as this colossal event. My own graduation? Totally forgotten, brushed aside. The words on the screen just hit me. It was all part of this carefully crafted narrative. A life I've been shut out of. That meant all the memories I cherished, or even my achievements, they were diluted to mere afterthoughts next to her glory. I felt sick to my stomach, like their manipulation had run way deeper than I thought. At this point, I still kept in contact with some of my teachers and even uncovered that my name was absent from the yearbook, despite being a solid student. I snapped. In this moment of rage, I decided I could no longer keep quiet. I called an impromptu family gathering for that weekend, this time determined to lay everything out on the table. But as the hours ticked by toward the big reveal, my sister seemed oddly calm while I was a coiling spring. I couldn't shake off how she brushed me off before, smirking like she already knew the game. It had gone so far that finally the tension in the air became unbearable. I was ready for whatever showdown would follow, but as I prepped my phone to replay the evidence, the dread washed over me. What if this didn't go the way I imagined? What if my family turned on me instead? The stakes were higher than they'd ever been. I gathered everyone for dinner, heart racing, ready to reveal everything I had uncovered. I hooked my phone up to the TV, and as I pressed play, clips of my sister's staged moments filled the screen. Her glossing over my achievements, her manipulating Dad into praising her while I sat silently. It was surreal, like watching a twisted family sitcom where I had become the punchline. Everyone was in shock as the evidence of our family's dysfunction laid itself bare. My mom's expression shifted from confusion to anger, and Dad kept shifting in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. When my sister's face turned white, it dawned on me how far I had come to reach this point. She never saw it coming. With the clips playing, I confronted my sister directly. I wanted her to feel the same kind of betrayal I felt every day, standing there with my childhood journal used against me. It turns out she wasn't just spreading lies. She'd held a twisted version of my life in her hands, reshaping what they thought was reality. I brought out documents, emails, and even my own notes about how painful all this was throughout the years. It was an emotional roller coaster, and I felt lighter saying everything I held back for so long. But then came the bombshell. I revealed the truth behind the email about the big vacation planned for my sister's graduation. I pulled it out, showing my parents how they kept celebrating her while they completely dismissed everything I had achieved. The guilt hit them, and it, for a moment, felt sweet, but also terrifying. The climax reached a point where my mom, unable to defend my sister, turned on her in disbelief, exclaiming how she never realized she was complicit in enabling this favoritism all along. The tearing apart of their facade led to my sister's final explosion. She screamed about how she felt constantly pressured to be perfect, and how I held an enormous grudge against her, turning the entire thing upside down. The shouting escalated quickly, and I was taken aback by this confession. Had it truly been her I was fighting all along, the puppet to my family's strings, shaped by the same toxic hands? Standing there, unfortunately, I knew it was merely the start of a longer conflict. We were just getting to the raw nerves as the truth unraveled in front of me. The moment I saw her realize I had turned the point of no return, her face drained of color, overwhelmed by fear, took my breath away. What I initially hoped would bring closure now sat in the air, thick with resentment. How we could come back from this. Now this confrontation was bigger than rivalry. It revealed the underbelly of our family, and I had to ask myself, what ultimately did I want from the truth? But it was too late for that question as I braced myself for the aftermath of our shattered family facade. The fallout from that dinner was unreal. It felt like a bomb went off in our family. My mom and Dad were tense, exchanging glances like kids caught in a lie. My sister was practically trembling, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes. She couldn't even look at anyone, especially not me. My mom tried to calm things down, suggesting we should all just take a breather and talk this out. Talk it out? It was too late for that. As soon as I yelled, "You don't get to decide how we talk about the truth anymore," my sister snapped, finally exposing that thin veneer of her cool confidence. She started hurling accusations about how I was just jealous of her life, and it all spiraled into wild passive-aggressive gestures when my parents intervened. After the dust settled, family gatherings became like navigating a minefield. Whenever Dad made a comment about the good old days, it felt like he was subtly trying to reassert the old dynamics, like nothing had happened. My mom shifted into this weird peacekeeping mode, trying to smooth things over, but I could see her irritation boiling beneath the surface. My sister? Well, she went cold, fully embracing the role of the victim now. The glaring absence of warmth between us just confirmed how much damage had been done. I couldn't tell if they were all still mad at me or at the situation itself. I felt it was impossible now to return to how it used to be. Then there's me, trying to figure out if standing up for myself was even worth it. I thought gaining my family's recognition would feel liberating, But instead, I felt this ghost of despair weighing heavier and heavier. I was sitting with this uneasy sense of regret. I had thrown everything into disarray, and while it felt good to have finally stood up to the favoritism, the rift was undeniable. I found myself questioning whether the small wins were worth all this destruction. There were remnants left. My journal being out in the open meant some parts of me were finally being seen, but at what cost? I couldn't get around how my sister would respond to being cornered like that. She was meant to be my sister, after all. How had we even gotten to this point? I kept thinking back to that moment when we were all shouting, memories mixed with confusion. The chaos revealed not only the issues pertaining to our family's favoritism, but also left some deep wounds that we would probably never heal. What if this had secretly mirrored our childhood, and I missed all those signs? I didn't get definite clarity, just a buzzing confusion wrapped in anger. That nagging feeling of uncertainty reminded me there was still so much I couldn't grasp. Were my parents fully aware of how toxic this was, or had they just chosen to ignore it all? The last dinner I attended, silence hung in the air, broken only by small talk that felt soulless and forced. And I found myself wondering, was this a new normal, or was this just the beginning of a more complicated relationship? As emotions still churned beneath the surface, I couldn't shake the feeling there were still untold truths lurking, waiting for their chance to surface. And here it was, the undercurrent that might wash away everything I thought I had just built up.